When the bell rang, evening was just beginning to slowly unfold over Chicago, painting the glass facades of the skyscrapers with a warm amber light. I was sitting at the dining table with an open folder of reports on it, the last edit before tomorrow's investor meeting. The city hummed outside the windows, lines of cars flowed lazily below, and birds drew slow arcs in the sky high above them, like melted honey. The phone vibrated, insistently and briefly, and I glanced at the screen. Mom is only 3 letters, but it's enough to make me feel something old, familiar, and uncomfortable. "Hi, Julia," my mother's voice was almost casual, but I immediately sensed caution in it, as if she was feeling ice under her feet. "My dad and I want to invite you to dinner. This Saturday. Just a family evening. We haven't seen you for a long time." I could say that I'm busy, that I have things to do, reports, parties, whatever. But instead, I heard my own voice, surprisingly calm. "Okay. I'll be there." After the call, I sat motionless for a long time, listening to the hum of the city outside the window merge with the hum in my head. Over the years, I've learned to keep my distance, not to let the past penetrate too deeply, but one call turned out to be strong enough to excite the lulled memory. As a child, this house was the center of the world for me, with the smell of freshly baked buns on Sundays, the ticking of the wall clock in the living room, and small pleasures like cornflakes with honey at the kitchen table. But then Amber showed up. The youngest, bright, flawless. And the house became a stage where there were no more lines for me. I checked out early on Saturday, even though I knew perfectly well that no one would notice if I stayed late. The journey to Milwaukee took just over an hour. I chose a simple outfit, jeans, a beige sweater, ankle boots, and my hair in a loose bun. Not a hint of status, success, or the reason why I am now often applauded at the end of meetings. Let them see the Julia they used to underestimate. The house looked almost the same as it had 10 years ago. The same peeling mailbox, the same maple tree by the porch, now only taller and thicker. I paused for a moment before pressing the bell. My father opened the door. "Oh, Jules," he said, and smiled, as if I'd come out of the next room instead of years of silence. "Come in." We just started packing. I went in. The smell was familiar, a mix of fried chicken, candles with a vanilla scent, and something rooted, elusively ancient. Amber was sitting on the couch in the living room. Her voice was full of emotion, her hands gesticulated so vividly that it seemed she was conducting her own story. And, of course, I told them that I would not stay without a promotion. They just have to take this into account after all the work I've done for the Lime project. "Wow," Mom exclaimed and patted her knee. "You're a real business shark." "And here's Julia," my father remarked, turning to me. Amber fell silent, her face instantly changed, her smile became a little wider, her gaze became colder. "Wow," she said. It appeared. "How are you, little sister?" "Still in. What's the name?" "Berkshire," I corrected, keeping my voice level. "Everything is stable." "Great. Are you probably already the shift supervisor or something?" Sugar rang in her voice, oversweetened, sticky. "I'm still there," I replied and sat down in a chair. Mom jumped up, came over, hugged me quickly, casually, and went back to Amber. They continued the conversation, exchanging phrases like a ball. I didn't try to interfere. It felt like the scene was following a long written script, in which I only had a couple of lines. Father served everyone glasses of wine. The dinner turned out to be delicious and familiar: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, salad with dressing, which my mother always made from mayonnaise, vinegar, and sugar. We ate, and Amber talked about the office drama, about a vacation in Hawaii, about a new handbag that fate gave her in the form of a huge discount. "Are you still renting a place in the city, Julia?" my mother asked innocently, pouring herself more wine. "No," I replied. "I bought an apartment a couple of years ago." "Oh, really?" she muttered. Well, owning real estate is a serious responsibility. I hope you're ready for this. I guess so, I said. I've been living there for a long time. There were no further questions. They turned to Amber as if she were the sun on which their breathing depended. I finished dinner in silence, nodding when I needed to nod, and smiling when I was expected to. And then she gathered up her purse and stood up. Thanks for dinner, I said. I have an early appointment tomorrow. Mom walked me to the door. It's good that you came, she said, almost sincerely. I nodded and left. As I drove back to Chicago, the night wind blew my thoughts out the car window, and one thing was spinning in my head. I was a guest in a house that once considered me its own. Not anymore. At one point, I stopped at a traffic light, looked in the rearview mirror, and saw in my reflection a woman who no longer needed approval. Not from them. Not from anyone. My name was Julia. I was 32. And I was returning home, to where I was my own family. When the phone buzzed again a few days after that dinner, I didn't immediately pick up the phone. The name Mom flashed on the screen again, and a familiar, slight tension rang in my head, as if a string inside me had trembled slightly. I swiped my finger across the display and answered. Her mother's voice sounded strained and cordial, with a note of elated excitement, the same shade with which she spoke when she was especially proud of Amber. Julia, we're having a family dinner on Saturday. Everyone's coming, Aunt Mary, Uncle Chuck, cousins. She listed the names as if flipping through a catalog of faces. We want you to come too. Amber has some special news. Very important. She wants to share it with her family. I didn't answer right away. Inside, as if on autopilot, a reaction was already preparing, a mixture of resentment and anticipation, like before a play, the script of which I knew by heart. Amber is back at the center. I'm back in the shadows, in a corner of the room where the light doesn't reach my face. But something kept me from giving up. Okay, I said. I will. Saturday turned out to be cool and clear. I spent the morning in my spacious dressing room, surrounded by silk and cashmere, among many options, each of which could tell a different version of me. In the end, I chose the very dress, black, laconic, with a perfect fit and fine hand stitching along the seams. It didn't shout anything, but it said everything. She put on modest but expensive earrings and pulled her hair into a neat low bun. Everything is as it should be. Everything is in shadow, but with fire inside. When I arrived at my parents' house, the street was full of cars. I recognized Aunt Mary's gray and blue minivan, Uncle Chuck's pickup truck, the same sedan that Cousin Lauren used to have. The house was full of voices, laughter, rustling footsteps, and the smell of baked meat mixed with the aroma of apple pie. I walked in and smiled the casual smile I'd been honing at business meetings for so long. Aunt Mary hugged me, smelling of vanilla perfume. You've changed so much. So sophisticated, so mature. Thank you, I replied, looking around. Amber stood by the kitchen, surrounded by a tight circle of listeners, like a sun with small planets revolving around it. Her dress, bright red and off the shoulder, screamed, "Look at me." Her hair was immaculately styled, and her manicure sparkled with every movement of her hand. She was talking animatedly to Uncle Chuck, and he laughed in response, slapping her on the back. I took a glass of wine from the table by the window and stood aside, watching, almost distantly, as the scene unfolded according to a predictable plot. Mom was running between the guests with trays, Dad was filling glasses, someone turned on music, an old Frank Sinatra record was fluttering in the speakers. Finally, when everyone was seated at the long table where the whole family used to eat on Thanksgiving, Mom tapped her glass with a spoon. "Attention, please," her voice rang like glass. "We have gathered you here for a special occasion. Amber wants to share some amazing news with you." Amber stood up, pausing like a real actress before the climax. "I bought my first apartment," Her voice trembled with joyful tension. In Arlington Heights. Spacious one-bedroom apartment in a good area. And Mom and Dad helped with the down payment. There was applause at the table, someone whistled, and Aunt Mary clapped her hands. "That's a good one," she said. "A real independent woman." "Well, not really independent," Mom added with a warm smile. "We helped a little. It's a family." "When's the housewarming?" one of the cousins asked. "I haven't decided yet," Amber replied coquettishly. "I want everything to be perfect before I invite guests." Mom suddenly turned to me. "And you, Julia, why are you silent? Don't you want to congratulate your sister?" I met her gaze and felt the gaze of several people at the table also rush towards me. Amber leaned forward, a grin dancing in her eyes. "She's just jealous," she said in a half-whisper, but with the expectation that everyone would hear. "Not everyone can afford a place to live nowadays." I put my fork on the edge of my plate, wiped my lips with a napkin, and calmly said, "Congratulations, Amber. This is really an achievement. Especially for someone who needs parental help. I bought my apartment 2 years ago. In the Lakeside Tower, off the coast of Michigan." There was silence. The one in which you can hear the clock ticking and how someone's breath stops. "Lakeside?" asked Aunt Mary, almost in disbelief. "Do you mean that high rise with panoramic windows?" "4 bedrooms, a corner block, a circular terrace," I added. Amber lifted her chin. "You're kidding," she said. "It's for millionaires." You're the assistant manager, aren't you?" I smiled a little. "I am the chief financial officer at Berkshire Capital. It's already the 3rd year." Glasses rattled. Uncle Chuck whistled in surprise. Someone dropped a spoon. The father blinked, as if he didn't understand what he had heard. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked with difficulty. I looked at him. "You never asked." The answer hung in the air like a wind brushing against a curtain. Everyone at the table fell silent. Only Amber sat unblinking, with a strained smile that no longer looked sincere. Mom, as if catching herself, squeezed out, That's wonderful, honey. When is your housewarming party? We would love to come and see it." It was 2 years ago. "For friends," I replied calmly. The rest of the meal went in a different vein. Questions, glances, cautious smiles. People who had barely noticed me for years were now hanging on every word. But I didn't feel triumphant. Just lightness. It was like throwing off a raincoat that she wasn't wearing for the weather. Liberation came not in recognition, but in the fact that I no longer needed it. I woke up early, as usual, in the complete silence of my apartment, bathed in the soft early morning light that penetrated through the transparent curtains. Chicago was waking up outside the window. The wheels of the first cars were rustling. Somewhere in the distance a truck was growling. The sky was slowly brightening. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and immediately noticed a flurry of notifications. 8 missed calls. Dozens of messages. Mom, Dad, Amber. One after the other, like a well-rehearsed choir. I scrolled through the feed without opening any of them, as if touching their words might stain my fingers. I felt that this storm would not subside until I gave in. But I wasn't going to give in anymore. A little later, when I was already drinking coffee on the balcony, the wind touched my face with light tremors, and the city unfolded at my feet like a complex but understandable pattern. I nevertheless decided to read one message. It was Mom. "Julia, we need to talk. Amber is having trouble with her mortgage. We thought, since you're so successful now, maybe you could help. You know how important it is to support each other. We're a family." After reading this, I was surprised not by the request itself, but by the confidence with which it was formulated. Not a question, not a cautious approach, but almost an order. As if what I can do now automatically means that I have to. as if they were entitled to a part of my success simply by the fact of kinship. So many years of indifference, disregard, condescension, and all this was nullified in their eyes with one of my confessions at the dinner table. How convenient. I typed the answer quickly, without hesitation. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't help you. The pause didn't last long. The call came next. I looked at the screen like I was watching an old movie whose ending I knew. Mom again. Are you serious? Her voice was low, with feigned resentment. Are you just going to refuse? She's your sister, Julia. She's in trouble. We thought you weren't like that. Not like that? I interrupted. Someone who can be used because she was silent before. The one whose silence was an advantageous backdrop for your amber pride. Then the voice became cooler. I don't understand why you have so much anger. We always tried our best. You did your best for her. And I was somewhere nearby all the time. A comfortable shade. And now you've remembered me because you needed help. It's not a concern. This is blackmail. She hung up first. A couple of hours later, I received a call from my father. He did not say greetings. His voice was immediately sharp, straight as sandpaper. You're being childish. Your sister is having real difficulties, and here you are playing cold independence. Where's your conscience, Julia? And she screamed for a long time when you didn't notice my existence. Now she's silent. Now I'm talking. We thought you were an adult. Responsible. And you're just selfish. I just stopped being comfortable. You didn't think so when you didn't come to my graduation. Or when they didn't notice how I was climbing the career ladder. And now you think you can come and take it. No, that's not how it works. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat with both hands wrapped around the mug and felt a strange warmth spreading inside, a mixture of pain and strength. I no longer trembled at their words. She was no longer afraid that she had offended them with her refusal. Because for the first time in a long time, I made a choice not out of fear, but out of self-respect. The messages continued until the evening. Some were insinuating, almost affectionate. Others are sarcastic, accusing. Amber wrote, "Do you think you're better than us now? Because you have money and an apartment on the beach?" Well, money is not a substitute for family. Especially when you're alone. I stared at the screen for a long time, then clicked delete without answering. It all sounded like a theatrical rehearsal for a role she'd never really felt. Intimacy. Caring. Equality. She only knew superiority, cultivated over the years by her parents, like a greenhouse for a single flower. That evening, I turned off the sound on my phone and turned on the music. She sat on the floor, leaning back against the sofa, and allowed herself to just be. Neither my daughter nor my sister. Neither an example nor an antagonist. Just by myself. I remembered how, as a child, I always expected them to notice how hard I was trying. Like the day I won the literature competition and brought home my diploma, Mom said, "That's great, but Amber has a performance tonight, we have to go there." Or like in college, when I got my first scholarship, but no one came to the ceremony. And then there were many more, too many, such moments. One by one, like nails in the lid of the drawer I was putting my hopes in. Now that drawer was open. I wasn't going to put any more feelings in there. I took a glass of wine, went out on the balcony and looked at the evening city. The lights shone softly, blurrily, the wind touched the cheeks and swayed the treetops along the street. I didn't expect anything from them anymore. Their requests, reproaches, reminders, all this was an attempt to keep me in a role that I no longer wore. The masks were dropped. They showed who they have been all this time. And I finally allowed myself to be who I always have been, just Julia, without their scripts, without their expectations. At that moment, I knew it was my choice. and I wouldn't change it for anything. I remember that morning with amazing clarity, as if the footage flashed in slow motion. Steam over a cup of strong coffee, the rustle of the pages of the quarterly report, the steady hum of the air conditioner, and the light reflection of the sun on the glass table. Everything was familiar, measured, and enveloping, like an old sweater worn on a gray autumn day. I was already immersed in my work when a notification from my assistant came to the office system. "Miss Williams, there are 2 people here to see you. They introduced themselves as your parents. They said they would wait as long as it takes." I froze. Something inside me tightened, not fear, no. Rather, it was a hollow response from the part of herself that had always been waiting for them. Maybe this time they had come for real. Not with claims, not with reproaches, not with masks. I looked at the reflection of the laptop screen. My face was composed, not a shadow of surprise. "Let them rise." "In 5 minutes," I replied, my voice barely audible. I put the papers on the table in order, straightened my back, straightened my jacket. Everything should be in place, both inside and around me. When the door opened, I was already looking out the window, as if the view of Chicago was more important than those who entered the office. "Wow," Mom breathed after walking a few steps. Her gaze darted around the room, over the bookshelves, the glass table, the awards on the wall. "You have it. It's beautiful." My father didn't say a word. He stood at the door as if he hadn't decided yet whether to stay or turn around and leave. His shoulders were slightly hunched, and his eyes were strained. "Have a seat," I suggested, nodding at the 2 leather chairs opposite. They sat down, slowly, as if they were sitting not on furniture, but on a sentence. "Julia," Mom began, clasping her hands together. "We didn't want to come like this. Without warning. But we don't have any other choice anymore." I was silent. "Let him talk. It's about Amber. She's having difficulties. Serious ones. We paid a part of the fee for it. She tried, but she lost her balance. If she doesn't find the money soon, she will lose the apartment." Pause. Mom looked at me with intense hope. "We thought maybe you could help. You know how hard it is right now. And well, everything is stable. You have succeeded. And we are a family. We have to support each other." I crossed my arms, resting my elbows on the table. My voice sounded smooth, almost soft. "No way." They shuddered almost simultaneously. "No?" my mother asked, as if hearing the word for the first time in her life. "I won't pay for Amber. Not because I can't. But because I don't want to. Because you were both deaf to me until you heard the sound of my success. You were never there when I needed you. Neither at the graduation ceremony, nor at the first awards ceremony, nor on those festive evenings that I spent alone. I built my life in silence, without applause. And now you want me to become a support for the one for whom you have always suspended me?" "Julia, this is unfair," my father began, but I did not let him finish. "It's unfair when your parents buy tickets to the younger daughter's school play, and leave the older one in the lobby with flowers and empty hands. This is when you go to university with a full grant, and no one even accompanies you on the train. It's when you come home for Christmas and no one notices that you're crying in your room because you're sitting alone again. This is unfair. For now, it's just being honest." Mom leaned back in her chair, her face like it was carved out of stone. There was silence for a few seconds. Only the noise of the air conditioner and the distant hum of the city outside the window. "If you turn away from us now, Julia," she said coldly, "you'll be alone. Family is all that a person has." I met her gaze, firmly, without fear. "No, Mom. I have friends who came to my performances, even when you forgot about them. People who ask how my day was. People who don't question my achievements, but rejoice at them. This is my family. I'm not alone. She wanted to say something, but I pressed a button on the panel. Nancy, I said to the assistant, please show my guests out. They stood up. My father paused at the door for a moment. You're making a mistake, he said. It's not over yet. I hope it's over, I replied softly. The door closed. And with her click, something inside me finally opened. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. My heart was beating slowly, steadily. For the first time in many years, I felt like I wasn't playing someone else's role. The weight that I had been carrying for so long evaporated, as if it were smoke, not a stone. It was the last meeting. And she didn't destroy me. She freed me. I've never been prone to impulsive decisions. My life is built on the principle of neat diagrams and structured files, goals, deadlines, resources. But the morning after that meeting, when the shadow of unspoken words still hung in the office air, I woke up with the only clear desire: to disappear. Not to hide, not to run away, but to disappear from that version of life where everything I did was measured by their approval or lack thereof. I got up and made coffee, slowly and thoughtfully, like a ritual. And instead of opening my laptop, I opened a browser and entered flights to Europe into the search box. Paris, Barcelona, Rome, I chose them not only for their architecture and wine, but also because I had never been to these cities with them. Not with Mom, not with Dad, not with Amber. There were no shadows from the past. It's just me in a space where I don't have to explain why I didn't reply to a message or congratulate my sister on her promotion. There I could just be a woman in a black coat on the pavement of Montmartre, a passenger on a tram in Plaza Catalunya, a tourist who throws a coin into the Trevi fountain, not making a wish, but saying goodbye to something old. Meanwhile, the phone wouldn't let up. First there were the messages. Think about us. That's all we're asking for. Your sister could lose everything. Then the accusations. You ruined the family. We gave away our last savings. You're going to get her into trouble. I read all this with amazing calmness. Previously, every word cut, poisoned, and broke. And now it was sliding along the surface without penetrating inside. They also hoped that guilt would force me to return to the cage where I had lived for years. But the door was already open, and I wasn't going to come in again. I blocked them. One by one. First Mom, then Dad. Finally, Amber. Was it cruel? Maybe. But there is a line between cruelty and self-defense that only you can draw. I'm tired of being available. I'm tired of explaining myself. I'm tired of existing solely as someone's eldest daughter, someone's sister, a backup player in someone else's play. I wanted to be a woman who chooses herself. In the evening, I was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket, with a glass of red wine in my hands. Behind the glass, the city buzzed, as if unaware of anyone's pain. Cars scurried through the streets, people hurried from work, shop windows glowed with garlands. Chicago was preparing for Christmas. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel lonely this season. Because loneliness is not the absence of people. It's when you're among people who don't see you. I chose silence. I chose myself. The next day, Tara, my close friend from college, texted me. We went through exams, moving places, the first disappointments in love, and victories that no one expected. She was my quiet support, not loud, not intrusive, but steadfast. Did you really cut it off? She asked at lunch, as we sat in our favorite cafe on the corner of Randolph Street. Yes, I replied, cutting a tiny lemon cake. And you know, I don't regret it. She looked at me carefully. There was no condemnation or surprise in her eyes. Only understanding. I'm proud of you. But it must be scary. I nodded. It's scary. But there is freedom in this fear. It's as if standing on a cliff, You finally stopped being afraid of the wind and realized that you have wings behind you. At work, I closed annual reports, prepared presentations, and made appointments. No one noticed that something fundamental was going on inside me. And maybe it was even for the best. I didn't want to share this experience. I didn't want to put it into words. It was personal, like a prayer, like the rustle of the pages of a book that you read only by lamplight in a lonely room. A week before my departure, I booked hotels, booked tickets to the Louvre and Sagrada Familia, and made a list of cafes that I would like to visit. But the timetable was not the essence of this trip. The point was the very possibility, to choose, to go, to disappear from the coordinate grid, where someone was always tracking my location. I didn't tell anyone that I was leaving. Neither to colleagues, nor to those who previously considered themselves close. Only Tara knew. And when I showed her the reservation, she just smiled. You deserve it. More than any of us. In the last evenings before the flight, I felt like my old skin was peeling off. It was like I was on the threshold of a new age. It wasn't youth, it was long gone. Not maturity, it came when I was still insecure. It was something else. I entered a life where I did not ask, did not prove, did not beg. Where she simply existed, whole, free. And it wasn't an escape. It was a comeback. To myself. The one that I once lost in the mirrors of other people's eyes. On the eve of departure, I stood by my suitcase and slowly packed my things. A silk dress for dinner in Paris, low-heeled shoes for walking on the cobblestones of Barcelona, a light scarf that could be thrown over my shoulders at a Roman sunset. I packed them not as a tourist, but as a woman entering a new era of her life. The phone rang again, of course. An unknown number. I clicked reject without even thinking. No one and nothing could spoil that fragile, petal-like feeling of peace that lived in me. I finished packing, turned off the bedroom light, and lingered in the living room. There's a graduation photo on the wall, me in a robe, alone, with a diploma in my hands and a restrained smile. I was physically alone then. Today, I am the only choice. And that, oddly enough, turned out to be much less lonely. The plane hummed dully as it lifted off the concrete strip in the cold morning light. I felt a heavy pull down, pressure, metal, the past, but now it comes off, and the ground beneath us begins to slowly recede, turning into a map drawn by a child's hand, squares of fields, lines of roads, shiny threads of rivers. Chicago remained behind, shrinking, disappearing under the clouds. I was sitting by the window, with an empty chair next to me, and for the first time in a long time I felt not anxiety, but a strange, unusual lightness. In front of me are Paris, Barcelona, Rome. Everything that I no longer intend to carry is behind me. When we reached the required altitude and of the fastened seatbelts, light went off. The phone in my hand vibrated with the last notification before the flight. An email. From an unknown address. The subject is, from Dad. I hesitated for only a second, then pressed open anyway. The text was long and heavy, like a dusty suitcase, filled with reproaches. He wrote that I had let them down, that selfishness would not make me happy, that they had spent everything they had tried to save Amber, and I, with a cold smile, turned away. And that I'm not what they raised me to be. I read to the end and felt nothing but quiet regret, not for myself, not for the decision, but for the fact that in this last attempt they did not see me again. I clicked delete, then switched my phone to airplane mode. No more sound. Not a word. No waiting. Paris greeted me with a gray sky and the smell of buttered coffee wafting from the bakery on the corner. I stood on the damp sidewalk with my suitcase at my feet and breathed in the air that didn't require an explanation. I wandered around the Louvre for hours without setting a goal to get everything done. I was just watching. The portrait of Marie Antoinette. Like statues with marble eyes. The reflections in the light-filled halls. Every step was a cleansing, from guilt, from anger, from the desire to be recognized. I didn't take pictures of myself. I didn't shoot stories. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Those moments were just mine. In a cafe on Moffler Street, I was eating croissants and listening to two French men discussing the theater next to me. In the evening, I sat by the Seine River, while the bridges over the water began to glow, as in childhood dreams, and I felt I was back. Not to the city, but to my place. Barcelona was different, warm, vibrant, full-blooded. Morning markets, the smells of citrus fruits, children running on the tiles of old courtyards. I met a woman from Chile there. She was selling jewelry at the entrance to Park Güell. We started talking. She asked why I was alone. Because it feels good, I said, and realized I wasn't lying. At dawn, I went to the beach and stared at the horizon for a long time. The waves rolled gently towards the shore, leaving white scars on the sand. No one called me, no one was waiting for me. And I wasn't lonely. Rome was the last chord. A city where the past lies on the surface, not hidden, not buried, in stones, in columns, in Roman streets, where every house remembers hundreds of years. On my last night, I was sitting in a small cafe near the Pantheon, with a glass of red wine and a notebook. I didn't write anything important. Just street names, thoughts, snatches of conversations. And suddenly I realized, I'm not angry anymore. The anger that had been in me for so long had gone out, like a lamp that had been left on in an empty room. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't looking for feedback. I just didn't need them to understand me anymore. I didn't need them to admit anything. I returned to Chicago when winter was already coming into its own. The air was fresh, with the taste of ice, and the sky was transparent, as if it had been wiped with a rag. My apartment greeted me with silence, and this silence was welcoming, like the greeting of an old friend. I took off my coat, put my suitcase against the wall and walked through the rooms, like a person who does not return, but enters his possession. There was a stack of mail on the kitchen table, 2 magazines, and a postcard from Tara. You deserve all this. No letters, no word from the family. And I wasn't expecting them. I took a shower, put on a soft housecoat, turned on the lamp in the living room and poured a glass of wine. I went out onto the balcony. The city buzzed below, businesslike, evening, and indifferent. But for me, this fuss had its own music. I stood leaning on the railing and thought, now my life belongs to me. Not their expectations. Not their fears. Not their requests and demands. Just me. And that doesn't mean I'm closed forever. This means that entry is now possible only for love. I smiled. No toasts, no high words. Just a quiet moment of recognition. Now my present begins. And I choose him with my heart.